The gunshot echoed across the Montana plains as Wade Porter steadied his horse, squinting through the dust at the small cabin ahead. It was 1878, and the promise of gold had brought him to this remote stretch of land, but the sound of a child's cry now pulled him toward something entirely different. The weathered cowboy had seen his share of trouble in these untamed territories, but the scene unfolding before him stirred something he thought long buried beneath years of solitary wandering. "Pa, it hurts," the boy's voice carried on the wind as Wade approached the modest homestead. Wade dismounted swiftly, his boots landing hard on the packed earth. The cabin door swung open to reveal a young boy of about 10, tears streaming down his dirt-smudged face, cradling his arm at an unnatural angle. Behind him stood a woman with copper hair pulled back in a hasty braid, her expression a mixture of worry and fierce determination. "What's happened here?" Wade asked, removing his hat as he approached. "Thomas fell from the hayloft," the woman explained, her voice steady despite the concern in her eyes. "His arm's broken bad. I'm Zara Lawson, and this is my brother's boy," Wade nodded, taking in the situation. "Wade Porter," he introduced himself. "I heard the commotion." "Can I be of assistance, madam?" Zara hesitated only briefly before nodding. "Do you know anything about setting bones, Mr. Porter?" "Served as a field medic during the war," Wade replied, following her inside the simple cabin. "Seen my share of breaks." The boy Thomas sat whimpering at the rough-hewn table, his face pale with pain. Wade knelt beside him, carefully examining the injury. "The break was clean, but would need proper setting." "I need to see to my horse," Wade said, rising. "Then I'll help with the boy." When he returned moments later, Zara had gathered supplies, clean strips of cloth, a pot of water boiling over the fire, and 2 straight pieces of wood that would serve as splints. "This will hurt some, son," Wade warned Thomas gently, "but it needs doing." Thomas nodded bravely, his small face scrunched with determination. "Tell me about yourself, Thomas," Wade encouraged as he positioned himself to set the bone. "Keep talking to me." As the boy began a halting story about his pony, Wade met Zara's eyes across the table. With a silent nod of understanding, she firmly held her nephew's shoulders while Wade quickly manipulated the broken bone back into alignment. Thomas's scream pierced the cabin, but the worst was over in seconds. Wade worked efficiently, wrapping the arm between the wooden splints while Zara soothed the sobbing child. Her gentle words and steady hands impressed him. This was no fragile frontier woman, but someone accustomed to handling crises alone. "He'll heal just fine," Zara assured Thomas, tying off the final knot in the bandages. "Mr. Porter knows his business." "You did well, young man," Wade added, giving the boy's good shoulder a gentle squeeze. "Braver than many soldiers I've treated." Thomas's tear-streaked face brightened slightly at the comparison. "Where's his father?" Wade asked quietly as Zara tucked Thomas into a small bed in the corner. "My brother Caleb's in town for supplies," she explained, her voice low. "Due back tomorrow." "I've been caring for Thomas since my sister-in-law passed last winter." Wade nodded, understanding the weight she carried. "If you don't mind, I'll make camp nearby tonight. Come check on the boy in the morning before I move on." Zara hesitated, then straightened her shoulders. "There's no need for that, Mr. Porter. We have a spare pallet. You're welcome to stay here. It's the least I can offer after your help." The evening settled around them as Thomas drifted into an exhausted sleep. Wade and Zara sat at the table, speaking in hushed tones over cups of strong coffee. "What brings you to these parts, Mr. Porter?" Zara asked, studying him across the flickering lamplight. Wade considered the question, his weathered face revealing little. "Heard tell of promising land, been moving west for years, never finding a reason to stop for long. And before that." Her directness didn't surprise him. Frontier life bred forthright people. "Virginia, lost our family farm in the war," he replied simply. "You, Pennsylvania originally." "Caleb came west 5 years ago with Elizabeth Thomas's mother. I joined them 2 years later when our parents died." She gazed toward the sleeping boy, Never thought I'd be helping raise my nephew. Wade noticed the softness that came to her features when she looked at Thomas. You do it well, he observed. Not everyone would take on such responsibility. He's family, she replied, as if that explained everything. Perhaps it did. The next morning, Wade checked Thomas's arm, pleased to find the swelling already reduced. The boy was in good spirits despite the pain, eager to show Wade his collection of arrowheads and tell stories of life on the homestead. Wade was chopping firewood, a task he'd insisted on despite Zara's protests, when a wagon approached shortly after midday. A man who shared Zara's copper hair and determined chin lines pulled the team to a halt, his expression darkening at the sight of a stranger on his property. Caleb, Zara called, emerging from the cabin. This is Wade Porter. He helped when Thomas broke his arm yesterday. Caleb's suspicious gaze softened marginally as he climbed down. Broke his arm, fell from the hayloft, Zara explained. Mr. Porter was passing by. He set the bone properly. Is he all right? Caleb asked, already striding toward the cabin. He's resting comfortably, Wade assured him. Brave boy you've got there. After checking on his son, Caleb returned, extending his hand to Wade. I owe you my gratitude, Porter. Thomas is all I have left of his mother. Wade accepted the handshake. No debt owed. Anyone would do the same. Caleb eyed him thoughtfully. Not just anyone knows how to set a bone proper. Mr. Porter was a field medic during the war, Zara explained, helping unload supplies from the wagon. Confederate? Caleb asked bluntly. Wade nodded. Virginia 18th. Caleb considered this. Fought for the Union myself. Pennsylvania 103rd. The moment stretched between them, years of conflict hanging in the balance. Then Caleb nodded. War's over, been over a long time. He turned to his sister. Porter stays for supper before he moves on. It wasn't a question, but Zara nodded anyway, already invited him. That evening, as they shared a hearty stew, Wade found himself drawn into the small family's conversation. Thomas, despite his injury, was animated, asking endless questions about Wade's travels. Have you seen Indians? The boy asked eagerly. Thomas, Zara admonished gently. Remember what we discussed about respectful questions. Wade smiled. I've encountered many native peoples in my travels, traded with Shoshone last year, good people if treated fairly. Like most folks, Caleb observed, refilling Wade's coffee cup. As evening deepened, Thomas reluctantly went to bed, leaving the adults by the fire. Caleb eventually excused himself, mentioning an early start the following day. We're clearing new ground for planting, he explained to Wade, hoping for a better harvest this year. After Caleb retired, Wade and Zara sat in comfortable silence, the crackling fire painting gold across her features. At 26, Zara possessed a quiet confidence that intrigued Wade. Most women he'd encountered on the frontier seemed either hardened beyond their years or frightened of their own shadows. Zara was neither. You're good with Thomas, Wade observed finally. Have you ever thought of having children of your own? The question seemed to surprise her, but she answered honestly. Once. I was engaged before coming west, but James didn't survive the influenza that took our parents. Her fingers twisted the simple silver band she wore on her right hand. Now I have Thomas, and that's enough. Wade nodded, understanding loss all too well. I should move on tomorrow, he said after a moment. Need to scout that land north of here before winter sets in. Something like disappointment flickered across Zara's face, but she nodded. Of course. Though you're welcome to stay another day if you need rest. Morning came with a heavy mist blanketing the valley. Wade helped Caleb with chores before preparing to depart, checking his horse and supplies with the methodical care of a man long accustomed to self-reliance. Thomas hobbled out to the yard, his splinted arm supported by a sling Zara had fashioned. Do you really have to go, Mr. Porter? Afraid so, son, Wade replied, kneeling to meet the boy's eyes. But I'll check back on that arm if I'm passing through again. Promise? Thomas asked solemnly. A cowboy's word is his bond, Wade assured him, tipping his hat. Zara approached with a small package wrapped in cloth. "Some provisions for your journey," she explained, handing it to him. "And our thanks." Their fingers brushed during the exchange, and Wade found himself strangely reluctant to break the contact. "No thanks needed, Miss Lawson." "Zara," she corrected with a small smile. "After setting bones in my kitchen, I think formalities are unnecessary," Wade nodded, mounting his horse. "Safe travels, Wade," Caleb called from the barn doorway. "Land office in Helena's corrupt as they come. Watch yourself." With a final tip of his hat, Wade rode away, the morning sun burning off the mist as he followed the winding trail northward. He told himself it was the promise of land that pulled him forward, not the peculiar emptiness that settled in his chest as the homestead disappeared from view. 2 weeks passed as Wade explored the Northern Territory, finding promising parcels but none that felt right for settling. His thoughts frequently returned to the small cabin and its inhabitants, particularly to Zara's steady hands and direct gaze. At night, staring up at the vast Montana sky, he found himself wondering if Thomas's arm was healing properly. On the 16th day, gunfire erupted as Wade made camp near a small stream. The bullet splintered the tree beside him, sending him diving for cover behind a rock outcropping. 3 riders appeared from the tree line, their intentions clear as they fired again. "Porter," one called. "We know you're there. Boss says you've been asking too many questions at the land office," Wade cursed silently. Caleb's warning had been accurate. The local land baron, William Blackstone, had clearly marked him as a threat. Wade had discovered evidence of claim jumping and intimidation throughout the region, all leading back to Blackstone's operations. Drawing his revolver, Wade returned fire, forcing his attackers to seek cover. The ensuing gunfight was brief but intense. Wade managed to wound 1 man before the others retreated, dragging their injured companion. "This ain't over, Porter," one shouted as they disappeared into the gathering dusk. Wade quickly gathered his belongings, knowing they would return with reinforcements. His horse had bolted during the gunfire, leaving him to travel on foot. With Blackstone's men likely watching the trails to Helena, Wade made the decision to head south back toward the Lawson homestead. He traveled through the night, the weight of his possessions slowing his progress. By dawn, exhaustion forced him to rest in a sheltered ravine. Dreams of gunfire and Zara's concerned face mingled in his fitful sleep. 3 days later, Wade approached the Lawson property with caution, alert for any sign he'd been followed. The cabin stood peaceful in the afternoon light, smoke curling from the chimney. Before he could announce himself, Thomas spotted him from the paddock. "Mr. Porter," the boy shouted excitedly, waving his good arm. "You came back." Zara emerged from the cabin, shading her eyes against the sun. Something in her expression, surprise quickly replaced by genuine pleasure, warmed Wade more than he cared to admit. "Wasn't expecting to see you again so soon," she said as he approached. Wade nodded grimly. "Ran into some trouble. Blackstone's men lost my horse." Understanding dawned in her eyes. "Caleb's in town, but he's spoken of Blackstone's operations. Come inside, you look half-starved." The cabin felt inexplicably like a sanctuary as Wade stepped through the door. Thomas immediately launched into a report on his healing arm, proudly demonstrating how he could now wiggle his fingers without pain. "Healing nicely," Wade confirmed after examining the boy's arm. "You've been taking good care." "Aunt Zara changes the wrappings every day," Thomas informed him. "She says cleanliness prevents festering." "Your aunt is a wise woman," Wade agreed, accepting the coffee Zara placed before him. After Thomas went outside to complete his chores, Zara sat across from Wade. "Now tell me what really happened," she said quietly. Wade explained his discovery of Blackstone's illegal activities and the subsequent ambush. "I found evidence he's been forging documents, claiming homesteaders abandoned their land. Several families have been forced out under suspicious circumstances." Zara's expression grew troubled. Caleb mentioned rumors. "The Hendersons lost their claim last month. Their cabin mysteriously burned while they were in town." "Blackstone's building himself an empire," Wade said grimly. "Anyone who stands in his way faces threats or worse." "And you've made yourself a target," Zara observed, her eyes searching his face. "What will you do now?" Before Wade could answer, hoofbeats announced Caleb's return. The man's surprised expression quickly turned to concern as Wade recounted his story. "You were lucky to escape," Caleb said, setting his rifle by the door. "Blackstone's hired guns don't usually leave witnesses." "I can't stay long," Wade acknowledged. "Don't want to bring trouble to your door." "Nonsense," Caleb replied firmly. "Winter's coming on. No man travels these parts alone this time of year without inviting death. You'll stay until spring. We could use the extra hands anyway." Wade glanced at Zara, finding her watching him intently. "I wouldn't want to impose," he said carefully. "It's settled," she declared, rising to stir the stew bubbling over the fire. "The barn loft is comfortable enough once we add some extra blankets." And so Wade Porter, who had spent years avoiding putting down roots, found himself integrated into the rhythm of the Lawson homestead. Days blended into weeks as he helped Caleb with the endless tasks of preparing for winter. Repairing fences, chopping and stacking firewood, smoking meat for storage. The first snow fell in early November, transforming the landscape into a pristine white expanse. Thomas's arm healed steadily under Wade's careful supervision. The boy followed Wade everywhere, absorbing his knowledge of horses, tracking, and survival skills with eager enthusiasm. Zara often watched their interactions with an enigmatic smile that made Wade's heart beat a curious rhythm. Evenings were spent around the fire, with Caleb sharing stories of his late wife and their journey west, Zara reading aloud from one of her precious books, and Thomas practicing his letters under her patient guidance. Wade contributed tales of his travels that delighted Thomas and, he couldn't help noticing, frequently drew Zara's full attention. One evening in early December, with Caleb in town for supplies, Wade found himself alone with Zara after Thomas had gone to bed. The cabin was quiet except for the crackling fire and the occasional howl of wind across the chimney. "You never speak of your family," Zara observed, mending one of Thomas's shirts by the firelight. "Did you leave anyone behind in Virginia?" Wade stared into the flames, memories surfacing that he usually kept buried. "Had a younger sister, Caroline. She died in '63. Typhoid swept through our county while I was away fighting. Parents passed before the war." "I'm sorry," Zara said softly, setting aside her mending. "Losing family leaves holes that never quite fill." Wade nodded, appreciating her understanding without pity. "What about you? Do you miss Pennsylvania?" "Sometimes," she admitted. "I miss the gardens in spring, the predictability of civilized life." Her lips curved in a small smile. "But there's freedom here I never knew back east, room to breathe." "Even with the dangers?" Wade asked. "Perhaps because of them," she replied thoughtfully. "Facing real challenges makes the pretensions of society seem rather silly in comparison." Wade studied her profile, outlined in golden firelight. "You're not like most women I've encountered, Zara Lawson." She turned to meet his gaze, a spark of challenge in her eyes. "Is that a complaint, Mr. Porter?" "Far from it," he answered honestly. The moment stretched between them, filled with unspoken possibilities. Zara broke it first, standing to bank the fire. "It's late. Caleb should return tomorrow, weather permitting." Wade nodded, rising as well. "Good night, Zara." "Good night, Wade," she replied softly. Something in her voice, a warmth, a question, followed him out into the cold night air as he made his way to the barn. The next day brought heavy snowfall, delaying Caleb's return. Wade and Zara worked together to ensure the animals were sheltered and fed, their movements around each other becoming a familiar dance. Thomas practiced reading aloud, proudly demonstrating how his healing arm allowed him to turn pages with increasing dexterity. As darkness fell with no sign of Caleb, worry began to crease Zara's brow. "He's likely waiting out the storm in town," Wade reassured her. "Your brother's too smart to travel in this." She nodded, though her eyes frequently drifted to the window. "He's all the family Thomas and I have left," she said quietly. "Since Elizabeth died." "Tell me about her," Wade encouraged, hoping to distract her from worry. Zara's expression softened. "Elizabeth was everything I'm not: graceful, soft-spoken, always proper, but she had steel beneath the silk. Followed Caleb west without complaint, built this life from nothing." Her voice caught. "The fever took her so quickly, 3 days from first symptom to last breath." "And you came to help raise Thomas," Wade observed. "What choice was there?" Zara said simply. "He needed me." Wade reached across the table, covering her hand with his own. "You're stronger than you give yourself credit for." The touch lingered, neither withdrawing until Thomas's voice broke the moment. "Is Uncle Caleb lost in the snow?" the boy asked from his bed, fear evident in his voice. "No, sweetheart," Zara assured him, crossing to sit beside him. "He's safe in town, waiting for better weather to travel." "Like when Ma got stuck visiting Mrs. Henderson that time?" Thomas asked. "Exactly like that," Zara confirmed. "Remember how she came back with candy for you, because the storekeeper felt sorry for her being stranded?" Thomas nodded, satisfied with the explanation, and soon drifted back to sleep. When Zara returned to the table, the moment between them had passed, but something had shifted. A door opened that could not easily be closed. Morning brought clearing skies, but no Caleb. Wade saddled his borrowed horse. "I'll ride to town, check on him," he told Zara. "Probably just delayed by the roads." Zara nodded, handing him a packet of food. "Be careful, the trail will be treacherous." The journey took twice as long as usual, the horse picking its way through deep drifts and icy patches. Helena appeared oddly subdued under its blanket of white as Wade rode down the main street toward the mercantile where Caleb typically conducted business. The storekeeper, a portly man named Hammond, greeted Wade with surprise. "Porter, thought you'd left these parts." "Been working at the Lawson place," Wade explained. "Caleb come through here recently?" Hammond's expression grew troubled. "He was here 3 days ago, loaded up supplies and headed out before noon." Wade felt a cold that had nothing to do with the winter air. He never made it home. A quick inquiry at the saloon revealed that Caleb had been seen arguing with 2 men known to work for Blackstone shortly before his departure. Wade's unease deepened as he mounted up and retraced what would have been Caleb's route home. 5 miles outside town, he found the first sign of trouble: scattered supplies half buried in snow beside the trail. Following the disturbed snow, Wade discovered Caleb's wagon overturned in a ravine, the horse gone. Of Caleb himself, there was no sign except a worrying amount of frozen blood on the driver's seat. Wade searched systematically, finding boot prints leading away from the crash site. Following them brought him to a small trapper's cabin where smoke curled from the chimney. Approaching cautiously, Wade drew his revolver before kicking in the door. Inside, he found Caleb lying on a crude pallet, pale and feverish, his leg wrapped in bloodied bandages. An elderly trapper stood over him with a knife, startled by Wade's entrance. "Easy, mister," the old man said, raising his hands. "Just changing his dressing. Found him half dead in the snow 2 days ago." Wade lowered his weapon, moving quickly to Caleb's side. The wounded man stirred, recognizing him through fever-glazed eyes. "Porter," he rasped. "Blackstone's men." "Ambushed me?" "Save your strength," Wade advised, examining the leg wound. The bullet had passed clean through, but infection had set in. The trapper who introduced himself as Jebediah had been treating Caleb as best he could with herbs and poultices. "Fever broke this morning," he explained. "Been touch and go." "I need to get him home," Wade said. "His sister and son don't know what's happened." Jebediah shook his head. "Moving him could kill him, wounds still draining poison." Wade made a quick decision. "I'll go back, tell them he's alive. Return with a proper wagon tomorrow." Caleb gripped his arm weakly. "Careful, Blackstone knows where we live, said he'd take our land, one way or another." Wade rode hard through the gathering dusk, concern for Zara and Thomas growing with each mile. As the homestead came into view, his worst fears were confirmed. 3 horses were tethered outside. None belonging to the Lawsons. Dismounting quietly, Wade approached on foot, drawing his revolver. Through the window, he could see two men inside the cabin. Zara stood defiantly before them. Thomas clutched protectively behind her. "Mrs. Lawson, be reasonable," one man was saying. "Your brother's likely dead. Woman alone can't manage a place like this." "I'm not alone," Zara replied steadily, "and I'm not selling." "Might not have a choice," the second man threatened, moving closer. "Accidents happen out here all the time." Wade kicked the door open, his revolver leveled. "Back away from the lady," he ordered coldly. Both men froze, then slowly raised their hands. Wade recognized one as a shooter from his previous encounter. "Porter," the man spat. "Should have known you'd turn up." "Get out," Wade commanded. "Tell Blackstone the Lawson property isn't for sale. Not now, not ever." "This ain't over," the second man warned, backing toward the door. "It is for today," Wade replied evenly. After the men departed, Zara sagged with relief, pulling Thomas into a tight embrace. "I was beginning to think you wouldn't return either," she whispered. Wade holstered his weapon. "Caleb's alive," he told her, "wounded but alive." The relief that washed over her face was profound. As she composed herself, Wade explained the situation, detailing their plan to retrieve Caleb the following day. "They'll be back," Zara said grimly after Thomas had been settled to sleep. "Blackstone won't give up easily." "No," Wade agreed, checking his ammunition. "But neither will we." They sat up late into the night, planning and preparing. Wade showed Zara how to use Caleb's rifle properly, and together they secured the cabin against potential intruders. Throughout their preparations, Wade was struck by Zara's calm determination. She had every right to collapse under the weight of fear and uncertainty, yet she remained steadfast, her focus unwavering. "Why did you really come west, Wade?" she asked suddenly as they sat by the fire, weapons close at hand. "You never seem surprised by the violence, the lawlessness." Wade considered his answer carefully. "After the war, Virginia held too many ghosts, needed somewhere I could breathe without memories choking me." He stared into the flames, started running and never found a reason to stop. Until now, her question hung in the air between them. Wade met her gaze. "Maybe, depends on what happens next." Morning brought new snowfall but no sign of Blackstone's men. Wade fashioned a makeshift travois that could be pulled behind his horse, suitable for transporting an injured man. "I'm coming with you," Zara announced as he prepared to depart. "Thomas needs you here," Wade countered. "Thomas is coming too." "I won't leave him alone with Blackstone's men possibly returning." Her tone left no room for argument. "Besides, Caleb will need proper nursing." They set out as a group, Thomas riding double with Zara. The journey was slow and arduous, but they reached the trapper's cabin by midday. Caleb was conscious, his fever reduced but still dangerously weak. "You shouldn't have come," he admonished his sister weakly. "Hush," Zara replied, immediately taking charge of his care. "When have I ever done what I should instead of what was needed?" The return journey was even slower, with frequent stops to check on Caleb. They arrived home after nightfall, transferring the injured man to his bed where Zara could tend him properly. Over the following days, Caleb's condition improved gradually under Zara's diligent care. Wade maintained a constant watch, expecting Blackstone to make another move. The threat hung over them like a storm cloud, darkening what should have been a peaceful time of healing. A week after Caleb's return, Wade rode into town to file a formal complaint with the territorial marshal about the attack. The lawman, a grizzled veteran named Turner, listened impassively. "Not much I can do, Porter," he said finally. "Blackstone's got friends in high places." "Without witnesses besides Lawson himself." "So he gets away with attempted murder?" Wade demanded. Marshal Turner sighed heavily. "Didn't say that. Said official channels won't help you much. Unofficially, Blackstone's pushing too many people. Sooner or later, they'll push back." "Already happening," a new voice interjected. Wade turned to find a well-dressed man observing their conversation. "Jonathan Morgan," the stranger introduced himself. Attorney, and I've been collecting evidence against Blackstone for months. This unexpected ally proved invaluable. Morgan had documented numerous cases of Blackstone's intimidation and fraud, building a case he planned to present to the territorial governor. Wade's testimony about Caleb's attack added weight to the growing evidence. It will take time, Morgan warned as Wade prepared to return to the Lawson homestead. Wheels of justice turn slowly, but they do turn. We'll hold out, Wade assured him. Just need to keep Blackstone at bay until then. The journey back was tense, Wade constantly alert for ambush. He arrived to find the homestead peaceful, Thomas helping Zara with evening chores while Caleb sat outside, his injured leg propped on a stool as he whittled. "How'd it go?" Caleb asked as Wade dismounted. Wade relayed his conversation with the marshal and the fortuitous meeting with Morgan. "We're not alone in this fight," he concluded. "Never thought we were," Caleb replied, his gaze moving meaningfully to where Zara was hanging laundry, her copper hair catching the fading sunlight. "Some things are worth fighting for, Porter." Wade nodded, understanding the multiple layers of Caleb's meaning. "Yes, they are." That night, after Thomas and Caleb had retired, Wade found Zara sitting on the porch despite the cold, staring up at the star-filled sky. "You should be inside," he said, settling beside her. "Too cold out here." "I needed the air," she replied. "Sometimes the walls close in." They sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes, their breath creating clouds in the frigid air. Wade was acutely aware of her presence beside him, the subtle scent of lavender that somehow clung to her despite frontier living, the warmth radiating from her even through layers of clothing. "What happens when this is over, Wade?" she asked finally. "When Blackstone's dealt with and Caleb's healed. Thought I might stay," he answered, surprising himself with the certainty in his voice. "If I'm welcome." Zara turned to face him, snowflakes beginning to dust her hair and eyelashes. "You know you are." "Do I?" he asked quietly. In answer, she leaned forward and pressed her lips gently to his. The kiss was brief but unmistakable in its meaning. "Now you do," she whispered as she pulled away. Wade's hand came up to cup her cheek, drawing her back for another kiss, deeper this time. Years of solitude and wandering fell away as he held her, feeling for the first time in a decade that he had found his way home. January brought bitter cold and increased tensions. Blackstone, pressured by Morgan's legal maneuvers, escalated his efforts to drive the Lawsons from their land. Shots were fired at their livestock, fences were cut in the night. Wade and Caleb maintained constant vigilance, sleeping in shifts. Through it all, the connection between Wade and Zara deepened. Their stolen moments were few but precious: a shared look across the table, hands touching while washing dishes, quiet conversations after Thomas slept. Caleb observed their growing closeness with approval, telling Wade one evening, "About time she found someone worthy of her." February arrived with news that the territorial governor had ordered an investigation into Blackstone's activities. Morgan rode out personally to inform them, bringing the additional news that other homesteaders were now speaking out against the land baron. "The tide's turning," Morgan assured them. "Hold fast a little longer." A week later, Wade spotted riders approaching a dozen men led by Blackstone himself. Wade and Caleb took defensive positions as Zara hurried Thomas to the root cellar with strict instructions to stay hidden. "This ends today, Porter," Blackstone called as his men spread out around the property. "You and the Lawsons have caused me enough trouble." "Law's on our side, Blackstone," Wade responded, rifle ready. "Governor's investigating you. Walk away while you still can." Blackstone laughed harshly. "Governors can be replaced, so can witnesses." The standoff stretched tense minutes into an hour, neither side willing to initiate the violence that seemed inevitable. Then, unexpectedly, hoofbeats sounded from the north. Marshal Turner appeared with 6 deputies and Jonathan Morgan. "William Blackstone," Turner announced formally, "you're under arrest for fraud, intimidation, and conspiracy to commit murder." Blackstone's face contorted with rage. "This is absurd. I have rights." "Yes, you do," Morgan agreed pleasantly. right to a trial which you'll receive in Helena. After the governor reviews all the evidence I've collected, several of Blackstone's men, seeing the changing winds, immediately surrendered their weapons. Others, more loyal or more implicated in his crimes, prepared to fight. For a moment, bloodshed seemed certain until Blackstone himself recognized the futility of resistance. "Stand down," he ordered his men bitterly. Turning to Wade, he added, "This isn't over, Porter." "Yes," Wade replied calmly, "it is." As Blackstone and his men were led away, Zara emerged from the cabin, rushing into Wade's arms with a relief so profound it nearly buckled his knees. He held her tightly, breathing in her scent, feeling the trembling of her body against his. "It's over," he murmured into her hair. "It's really over." Thomas burst from his hiding place, whooping with excitement as he ran to Caleb, who gathered him up with his good arm. The family, for that was what they had become, stood together in the winter sunshine, battered but unbroken. That evening, with Thomas finally asleep after hours of excited recounting of the day's events, the adults gathered around the fire. Morgan had stayed to discuss next steps in securing the Lawsons' land claim permanently. Marshal Turner had promised increased patrols until Blackstone's trial. "What will you do now, Porter?" Morgan asked as their business concluded. "Man with your skills could find work easily in these parts." Wade's eyes found Zara's across the room. "Think I've found where I belong." After their guests departed, Caleb tactfully excused himself, leaving Wade and Zara alone by the fire. Wade took her hands in his expression solemn. "I've been wandering since the war ended," he began. "Never thought I'd find a place or people that felt like home again." Zara squeezed his hands. "And now I can't imagine being anywhere else," he admitted. "I love you, Zara Lawson. Have since you wrapped Thomas's arm and said he'd heal just fine. Your strength, your compassion, everything about you." Tears shimmered in Zara's eyes. "I never thought I'd find love after James died. Convinced myself Thomas was enough, that I didn't need more." She reached up to touch his face. "But I do need more. I need you, Wade Porter." Their kiss sealed promises neither needed to voice aloud. When they finally parted, Wade pressed his forehead to hers. "Marry me," he whispered. "Help me build something lasting here." "Yes," she answered without hesitation. Yes, spring arrived with Blackstone's conviction and a wedding. The simple ceremony took place outside the cabin, with wildflowers decorating every surface and neighbors from miles around attending. Thomas served as ring-bearer, proudly carrying the simple gold bands on a small pillow, his once broken arm now fully healed. Caleb, standing tall without his crutches, gave his sister away with misty eyes and a firm handshake for his new brother-in-law. Marshal Turner and Jonathan Morgan attended as honored guests, their efforts having secured not just the Lawsons' land but justice for dozens of other homesteaders Blackstone had terrorized. As Wade and Zara exchanged vows under Montana's vast blue sky, Wade reflected on the strange path that had led him here. A broken boy's arm had brought him to this family, this love, this future stretching before him full of promise. The war's ghosts no longer haunted him. The restlessness that had driven him for years had finally found its answer in Zara's steady gaze and loving heart. That night, as they lay together in the small cabin addition Caleb and Wade had built for the newlyweds, Zara traced the scars on Wade's shoulder, remnants of his war service. "We all have scars," she murmured. "Visible and invisible." Wade caught her hand, pressing a kiss to her palm. "And all can heal with proper care." "Like Thomas's arm," she agreed with a smile. "You said he'd heal just fine," Wade reminded her. "You were right." "I'm right about many things, husband," Zara teased, snuggling closer. "You do well to remember that." Wade laughed softly, holding her close. "I suspect I'll be reminded regularly for many years to come." 1 year later, Wade stood in the doorway of their expanded cabin, watching Zara rock their newborn daughter. Thomas, now 11 and growing like a weed, sat beside them, carefully holding his cousin's tiny hand and marveling at her perfect fingers. "She's so small, Aunt Zara," he whispered in awe. "All the best things start small, Thomas," Zara replied, smiling up at Wade. "Like seeds or ideas or love." Caleb joined Wade in the doorway, clapping a hand on his shoulder. "Happy brother," Wade nodded, his throat tight with emotion as he watched his family, the family he'd never thought to have, the home he'd never thought to find. "More than I deserve," he answered honestly. "Nonsense," Caleb countered. "You fought for this. We all did." And that, Wade reflected as he crossed the room to join his wife and daughter, was the truth of life in these untamed lands. Nothing came easy, but what was earned through struggle and perseverance was all the more precious for the effort. As evening fell over the Montana homestead, Wade Porter, once a lonely wanderer, now husband, father, and landowner, sat surrounded by love. The broken places in his heart mended as surely as Thomas's arm had healed under his care. The boy who had once cried in pain now laughed freely as he told his baby cousin stories of adventure. The woman who had once faced the world alone now rested securely in the circle of Wade's arms. They had weathered threats and violence, faced down evil men and harsh elements, and emerged stronger for the trials. Together, they would build something lasting on this wild frontier, a legacy of love, resilience, and hope that would endure long after their names were forgotten. In the deepening twilight, Wade kissed his wife's temple and whispered, "You were right, you know. Everything does heal just fine with the right care." Zara smiled up at him, their daughter sleeping peacefully in her arms. "Some things heal better than fine," she corrected gently. "Some things become stronger at the broken places." Wade nodded, understanding the profound truth in her words. Like the land around them, scarred by harsh winters yet bursting with new life, each spring they had emerged from darkness into light, their future stretching before them like the endless Montana sky, boundless with possibility.